guys, it's DYEN, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to make Percussion style hard melodic rave techno. I made a lot of videos in the style, especially recently, but there's a bunch of new stuff that I keep figuring out about the style, so I keep wanting to make new stuff to show you guys. And yeah, I think this one's really special. If you heard the track in the intro, you know what I'm talking about. As usual, you can get this full project file, every single thing that you see here, the MIDI, samples, presets, and like I said, the project file is available right at the top of the description on my Bandcamp for just $10. It's a really great deal, it's a really solid track, and you get a lot of stuff to work with for really not that expensive. It really helps support me as well. And yeah, let's get started. Link is at the top of the description to that. So, this is the track. The first thing here is the kick, which sounds like this. So as you can hear, pretty hard kick. And this kick is actually a combination of two different styles of hard techno kick. So we have sort of like our regular, like rolling kind of bass like that. But we also have one of these blended in. Like your standard distorted bass, and then if I take off that EQ. So it's kind of like combining those two styles of kicks. But I think what you get is you get a really nice and full sounding kick this way. Because obviously, like, you could do just this. You could do just the distorted kick. But when you blend them together, there's just so much texture and so much character going on there. And I think it's going to make your track a lot more exciting. And it's not actually that hard to do this. Really what it comes down to is just knowing which one you want to be the main bass. And then knowing which one you want to be kind of like the texture layer. So it really could be either. That's the thing. You could use this and take like... If we change this to like that, you know, that could be our bass now. So like, you really just have to choose which one you like, whichever sounds best. But for the rolling bass, so it's made, they're both made with the same kick. It's actually this minimal kick here. I'll play it for you. It's just one that I've made. And really what it is it's just some 909 kicks. So that's what you typically want to use, especially for that distorted bass. It's just going to be like a 909 kick. But I'm using it here, and what's happening is it's playing 16th notes, so it's just going da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then you can see, so I've got it going through a bit of drum bus, which makes it fatter and also just kind of adds a bit of bass. I have this EQ8 here as well, just boosting the line a little bit. We have a compressor sidechaining it to the main kick, which is very important. You want to make sure this is sidechained. And then I have these two filters here. So this EQ here is first of all just cutting out some lows below 30 Hertz because we really can't hear much lower than that. But those low frequencies are going to get in the way of your mix and kind of mess up your mastering. And then this low end, yeah, you can see that's just taking just the lows. So pretty simple, just a nice full sounding kick just going and it makes a really solid bass line. And then for the distorted kick, the way that's working is, again, it's that same kick. This one's just playing quarter notes. You can see I actually stretched it out a little bit with the warp, so that's kind of a useful thing about using Ableton for this. But then what's happening is, to stretch it a little bit more, I have some compression. So here's without that. And with it, you can hear it just kind of fills out the sound a bit, kind of like pulls up some of those frequencies. So now it's going to be a little bit more even going into the distortion. And it just sounds a bit more full. And then we have this audio effect rack here, which you actually don't need. I could just take these out of the audio effect rack, ungroup it real quick. But essentially what's happening here is, this is what's creating the distortion. So what it is we're taking this really heavy pedal distortion here. You can see it's a really, really hard hitting distortion. And then we're low passing the sound going into it. So here's without the low pass filter. See, without it, it's a little bit too much of like a hard style kick, you know. But then the low pass, like this distortion here is going to make that sound regardless. Like that crunch is coming from the distortion. That's not really coming from the 909. So just kind of low passing that going into it kind of dials it back a little bit. And just makes the distortion a bit smoother. It's little tiny stuff like this, like the compressor or the low pass filter that like, when you hear this kick, you might just think, oh, it's just a distorted 909. But as you can see, these little things are going to make a big difference. And then I just have some drum bus on that. An EQ, which is boosting a bit of like the mid-range. You're not really hearing that because we are cutting out the lows. And then this being sidechained to the kick. And then we just have a high-pass filter. And then I also have this utility converting it to mono because you can see it was in stereo. It just tends to sound a bit better in mono. It's also boosting the volume a bit. And yeah, and then on the group of everything, we only have 3 effects. And the first thing here is just this low-end boost. EQ. Just kind of brings that out. Since we're already cutting the really low frequencies on the bass, we can just kind of boost it here. And it's still not going to have those like super low things, but we're just boosting the stuff that's still there. I have a limiter which just kind of glues these all together. Here's without it. And with it not doing too much, but that little bit that it's doing just gives it a lot of fullness. And then this high pass filter which just comes in, you know, for some of these breaks here. And yeah, then we have this vocal, which this is really simple. What this is, it's just a little vocal sample that I've shortened here. You can see I pitched it a bit as well. And then it's going dun 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 dun. Like this kind of like dun dun dun. But then what's happening is we have two delays on here. We have an eighth note delay and a dotted eighth note, or a dotted quarter note delay. And so those delays combined with the original signal going dun 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 creates like this nice like da 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 kind of like very rhythmic vocal thing. And yeah, I've heard this in a lot of these tracks, and that's the technique to make that. It's just making a pattern that already has a lot of rhythm, but then adding more with the delays. It's a combination of programming and effects at the same time. And then we just have a bit of reverb on the sound, as well as a bit of drum bus, which kind of fattens it up. I have this low pass filter, bringing it in there. And this auto pan here, which you can see just makes it kind of bounce up. So it's got a little bit more rhythm to it. And then I have a high pass filter. And yeah, then we have these little stabs. But you can hear these are doing a bit of call and response off of each other. So I hear these in a lot of these tracks. And typically, yeah, you don't want to just have like one. You want to have two of these. And what's going to happen is you're going to have some parts where it's just one of them. Like obviously like here when it's really full, we're just using the noise stab. But then you can have both of them. And it creates like kind of an interesting groove because you're getting call and response. And these are really simple. So the noise stab is just made using using analog. So it's a sine wave with a little bit of white noise, and then that's going into a low pass filter. And the secret here is that the low pass has a really high resonance. So then when you put that into this amp here, you get that kind of cool texture. Like if I turn off the resonance, you can see that's what's doing it essentially. And then also what's happening here to keep in mind is like the sine wave is really detuned. And the low pass filter is never really going to be exactly on a note. So you're kind of getting that clash there between the sine wave and the low pass filter playing two different notes. And I think that's adding a lot to the texture of the sound as well. Like if we get rid of the sine wave, it's a little bit too flat. Then we just have some echo, a bit of reverb. I have a low pass filter which brings this in and out. And then just a high pass filter. And then for the bass stab, that's made with wavetables. So that's actually a pretty simple sound. You can see it's just a saw wave and a square wave detuned, going into a low pass filter, which has an envelope. You can see that makes that go down. And then we have the shimmer unison, which kind of gives you a nice texture. But it's just like a big super saw basically. And then just some reverb. I have a bit of this amp which is being blended. You can see here's without it. And then with it. So it adds a nice crunch to the sound and the texture. And then I've got a high pass filter here, just cutting out the low end. Then we have this pad. Now the MIDI on this pad, although this is a really cool sounding pad, the MIDI is actually not that complicated. But what it's going to come down to is you have to have kind of like two different melodies playing at once. So what's happening here is we have that's happening. So you're hearing that, just that You're constantly hearing that, and then on top of that you're hearing. So like it's combining those two different melodies together, and that's really what you want to go for. And that's essentially what creates this like really deep, like emotional burial style pad. Now, for the actual sound on this one, it's just made with 2 layers here. And that's also a big part of the sound, is combining this FM pad, which you can see is just some sine waves, an operator, pretty straightforward stuff there. But combining that with this choir sample, so we get the best of like a live sound and a synth. Like it almost sounds like a RuneScape synth or something like that, but it's really dope. And then we have some reverb. I have a high pass filter, which has a bit of automation just going into here to make this kind of disappear a bit. I have a compressor, which is not actually doing anything, but you could use it to sidechain this to the kick if you wanted to. I just kind of left it in there. And then I just have a low pass filter, which brings this in and out. And that's going to be pretty important, because obviously this is really repetitive, so having something to kind of open up and then, like I said, like bring it out at the end makes a big difference. And yeah, then we have the percussion, which is all pretty straightforward. So you can see it starts with the synth roll here, which is just like a nice white noise layer inside of operator. What's happening is it's white noise going into a bandpass filter, which has an envelope. So there's the noise, and then the bandpass, and then the LFO. You can see I have it on the sample and hold, which essentially just means random LFO. So now you get this moving all around, and it's this very dynamic and exciting sound now. And if you turn up the amount even more, you can really hear it. But yeah, so that's a good way to make some like nice kind of like rolling background percussion. And then just have it going through a bit of echo, this auto pan to make it bounce off of the kick. And there's also a low pass on this one because it comes in from the start. Just adding like some nice texture underneath the kick there. We have this little like reverse hi-hat as well as the main open hi-hat. So that's just like an open hi-hat going through a low pass filter with an LFO, so it's constantly moving. And some reverb. And then this one is just 2 hi-hats layered together. So it's this one, a 909, with this very punchy, mid-rangey hi-hat. Give it like a ch. And then we also have some reverb on there. And then we just have like a shaker. We have this ride, which is pretty standard techno ride, just high pass filter. I've got the echo on here with the ping pong and a really fast delay to make it stereo. And also just a high end boost. The main thing with this one that I noticed is typically with the harder techno, you want it to be a bit lower pitched. Like if you bring it down to here even, like that's not too bad. Like just getting that low, like deep kind of ride. But then on the group of those, I just have a bit of drum bus, which actually I haven't done in a while, but it does make this just like really nice and fat for this more aggressive style of techno. And then just a high pass filter as well as a high end boost with this EQ here. And yeah, then we have this one extra percussion layer. Just these rolls. I didn't want to put that in that group because it didn't really need all that processing. But you'll notice that just comes in at sometimes, like, particularly here you can really hear it. Like, we come from this part where it's, you're hitting pretty hard, you've got a pretty nice groove. But then when we get to bar 65, we need something new to make it a bit more full. So now you have even more rolls underneath there, and it's just adding, like, even more fullness to the groove there, and that's just going through a high pass filter. You'll notice though that one really doesn't matter what processing you put on it. Like it's not about like this magical processing chain that's gonna make it, you know, super aggressive and crunchy. It's just about getting a good sound that has a good texture to it already. And then the last 2 layers we have down here are these leads. So the first one is the main lead. So this lead is actually pretty straightforward. It's all just in this B minor scale. Like here, we're literally just using one note, just B, and then sliding up to B, another B, and then it goes down to the 6th, which is G, and then up to the 4th, which is E. The main thing is just knowing how to make that sound really cool, like getting that like where it goes low, and then high like that, versus just, like if we just do that walking down the scale, it's not as cool. And then over here, it goes up to the 5th. Now you actually kind of get like a major 7th sort of chord happening here where we go G and then F sharp there. So that's kind of like, you know, just understanding that melodically. And like the feeling that you can get from that is going to be important. And yeah, and then this is just in an instrument rack. What's happening here is it's 2 wavetable layers. So we have this one You can see it's just a saw wave with some pulse width. And another saw wave going through this phase sync unison. But then we're layering that with the same thing, but without the unison. So just to get more fullness to it. Because if you just use the unison one, it's a bit too, like, kind of washed out. You know, you need this to, like, give it that nice crunch and fullness. And that's just going through a bit of chorus, a bit of reverb as well, which is pretty short. You don't want a long reverb with this. I got this bass amp here. You can hear just adding some nice texture that's blending in here. I have a compressor on this one that you could use for sidechaining as well. I'll turn that on. You don't necessarily need to sidechain this one. It's really just whichever sounds best. And then I just have a high pass filter, which is not cutting out too much, but just kind of like getting rid of the low lows. An EQ8 here, which is cutting out a bit of room for the kick, and also boosting some highs and mids. Here's without that. And with it, you can hear that's pretty important actually at the end of the chain to just kind of make it fit into the track better. And then finally just a low pass filter, which brings it in and out. And this is really dynamic. You know, you want to make sure that like all the way through the track, like, you know, it's constantly moving, and it's not just sitting in the same place once, or multiple times, I should say. Then the last layer we have down here is the second lead, which sounds like this. Which this is just using notes from that B minor scale again, like kind of playing with that 6th and 5th a lot. That's just a B. That's that 4th. It's all the same notes that you actually saw in that main lead. Like, we're not using any notes that aren't being used there. And that's something too, like if you're gonna have two leads like this, you know, pick a few notes and kind of explore what you can do with those notes, rather than like trying to go and add a bunch of extra notes to this lead that aren't in the other one, because that's how you can really make your synths sound together, is if they're just using the same notes but doing different things with them. Now for this one, it's a pretty straightforward sort of unison synth. It's just a saw wave with the noise unison. That's what gives you that really cool texture, kind of like Viper Diva, Shlomo style. Got that going through a bit of echo just on dotted quarter notes, a bit of reverb. This one's also got a sidechain, which I'll turn on, but again, I wanted to point out that you don't necessarily need that. And then just a high pass filter, and then a low pass filter to bring it in through here. And yeah, so again, like, pretty straightforward to write a track in the style. Like, the main thing is just going to be writing like a good lead, you know, getting a good kick, getting good sounds, and just kind of laying it out so that it's not going to be too much of one thing, but it's also not going to be like too boring, you know? Just keeping that arrangement moving all through the track. And yeah, so that's going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get this full project file, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video is available right at the top of the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. Thank you so much to everybody who goes to pick this up. Really helps support me so I can keep going and bring you guys new videos every single day. And yeah, thanks so much, guys, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.